Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Business of Wellness podcast. I'm David Guttman. If you find this content useful, like, subscribe, and share. Got a really interesting guest today, Connor Ward, Director of Operations for SmartFit.
Yes.
Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
So I got introduced to SmartFit, I guess now it's probably a month and a half ago, something like that, through Lumati and the relationship that SmartFit has with Lumati. And I was out in Salt Lake City, got to meet the other Connor, one of the founders, and I was just absolutely blown. So I've been an athlete my whole life. I Division I college wrestler, competitive triathlete for about 5 years after school, and I have never had as good of a fitness experience as I did when I went to visit your guys' location in out in Utah. And of course, then my wife came in. You guys were very gracious and gave her a great experience as well. How did you get into that space? How did you meet, Connor One? And maybe talk a little bit about your journey at SmartFit.
Kind of going back to getting in the space, I feel like this is always the pathway that I was kind of working towards as a kid and growing up playing sports, same as yourself. But I always knew that my future was working with my brain, not with my feet. So I was a soccer player and I was kind of a brainy, nerdy kid, that sort of stuff. But I was also a really sick kid. So I grew up with really bad asthma. And
I have that in common.
Yes. And so I grew up knowing what it was like not to have your health. And those experiences really shaped me into wanting to pursue a pathway to help other people improve their own health. And so the combination of athletics and kind of my exposure to the wellness industry, healthcare industry, all that sort of stuff, I was originally on kind of a pathway to be like a doctor or a PA or a physical therapist, like all that sort. And ultimately, there was just too much kind of friction going that direction. It didn't feel completely natural. And so ultimately got my master's in exercise physiology, got certified as a performance nutritionist, a number of other certifications in the wellness and performance and sports space. And then with SmartFit, I applied as a trainer at the original location. And I was trying to figure out my career. I would finish grad school in 2019. So
how old were you when you finished grad school?
2019, about 23 years.
Wow.
22, 23. And right as COVID is hitting, so I actually started a business called Efficient Fitness, which isn't around anymore, but it's very coincidental that was the business that I started right out of grad school. But COVID, bad timing, all that sort of stuff. So fast forwarding into SmartFit, I applied as a trainer. I recognized how efficient, effective the results that people were getting within the studio, and then ultimately recognized the quality of the business model and decided I wanted to open up my own facilities. And now I own 2 facilities and I help manage Southern California as well.
So, I've been in, I don't know, if I had to guess, I've probably been in over 100 gyms in my life. And, everything from, a Gold's Gym to an Equinox and kind of, everything, different kind of studios like Orange Theory and stuff like that. But the equipment that you guys have is next level. Did you guys evaluate a lot of equipment? Because like the ARX machine and is it ExoFit? Am I saying that right? Oxfit, the Carol bikes, the Vesper bikes. Like I've never seen most of that tech before. Are you guys like evaluating those things all the time and then deciding which things you're going to put in and which things you're going to, get rid of?
Well, the origin story really surrounds the Vesper machine. So the co-founder, Rob, he had a heart condition that ultimately he was not able to exercise in the normal way. He needed a way that was much more kind to his body and specifically his heart. So he found the Vesper. It was much more low impact on the body while not sacrificing the results that you're able to get from the machine. And then once he was getting those great results, he started seeking out other equipment that could provide a similar high potency like stimulus for exercise without causing too much wear and tear or stress on the body. And so I started with SmartFit about 7-8 months after the company itself started. So I wasn't around for the origin of it all, but we've added 3 or 4 new pieces of equipment during that time, basically trying to complete the puzzle of that data-driven approach to exercise. So being able to tell people exactly how much their cardiovascular fitness is improving via metabolic testing, VO2 max testing, doing body scans on a consistent basis, measuring their strength improvements, and then other vital signs as well. So It's basically evaluating equipment that contributes to our data-driven approach while maintaining the efficiency and the safety that our other pieces of equipment are able to maintain.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing to me how little time and attention people spend that are spending a lot of time in the gym. So they're spending 2 hours a day, sometimes 5, 6, even 7 days a week. And they spend almost no time thinking about the efficiency of those workouts. Mm-hmm. Like when I was younger, I overtrained. When I wrestled, I overtrained. When I did triathlons, I overtrained. I used to think, well, if 2 hours of working out's good, then 4 hours is better, and 6 hours is even better than that. And what I realized as I've gotten older and injuries and things like that, that really the trick is how do you optimize that? And so how do you, when you have people come into SmartFit, I would imagine you probably have everything from college and professional athletes all the way down to soccer moms and, dad bod type guys like me, whatever. Like, how do you think about them differently? Do you think about them the same, or is it, just totally depends on the person?
Well, going back to what you started with, I think wrestling and triathlons are probably two of the pursuits that are really prone to overtraining. And one of our core ethos within the studio is that you need to balance the amount of stimulus and the amount of recovery that you're undergoing. And the thing with our equipment is that it's such a potent stimulus for breaking the body down, mechanical tension, muscle damage, that sort of stuff, that you can spend less time breaking the body down and more time building it back up in that recovery phase. And the metaphor I really like to use, because it's very accurate, is that exercise is like digging a hole. Recovery is filling that hole back up. And then the result is putting a little mound on top. And what's so different about SmartFit is that we're using a shovel to dig that hole versus using like a spoon to dig that hole, which is dumbbells, barbells, spin class, whatever. So we're able to dig that hole so much quicker. And then you focus on filling that hole back up and then getting that result on top of it. If someone is constantly just spinning their wheels, digging with a spoon, trying to deliver like a potent stimulus, they're going to spend way too much time breaking the body down and not enough time building it back up. Because we don't want to spend all of our time sore and fatigues and all that sort of stuff. You want to apply the stimulus. You want to get into the gym, do your thing, and then get out. And then focus on sleep, nutrition, stress relief, all the other stuff that's actually going to give us the results that we're looking for.
So I remember seeing this guy, and I can't remember who he was. It was a guy on Joe Rogan who's one of these fitness gurus. And one of these, he said, he's very specifically talking about that you should have at most mild soreness the day after exercising, at most. And in a perfect world, none at all. Mm-hmm. That then you're able to basically continue to sort of, dig the hole, if you will, if the recovery is there. Mm-hmm. Do you think that, I'm curious your opinion, should you be sore the day after a workout? How sore should you be?
Well, to your point of different people coming to the studio, we have a lot of people where they haven't exercised in years or they're avid exercisers. We have people in their 80s and 90s. We have people I have teenagers and in their early 20s. So we have a lot of different types of people. And if you're coming onto an ARX workout for the first time of not exercising in years, the likelihood is that you're going to be sore. But the really cool aspect of our equipment is that you're in complete control over how easy or how hard any given workout is going to be. Because what I like to do with the ARX specifically is I'll show them the platform. I'll just have it move back and forth without them applying any pressure to it. And they'll see the machine's just moving back and forth. It's me deciding how much pressure I'm actually putting onto that machine. So me personally, my workouts can vary as much as 30, 40% as far as like the maximums that I'm able to produce. So like my force output, because sometimes I just don't feel like awesome. It's like, I'm not going to give 110% to produce as much power as I possibly can. I'm going to listen to my own body of what I feel that I can do on that day. And I think typically I'm approaching it somewhere between 75 and 90% of like a max intensity, but modulating that based on how I feel. So kind of going back to the equipment a little bit, all of them are going to adapt to what each individual user is capable of doing, and they're able to choose how intense that workout is. So over time, again, it takes a little bit of time to get used to how the equipment works, but they're able to decide like how hard they want their workout to be that day, basically.
I might have mentioned this to you, but I've been trying to find an ARX machine. I was living in Miami and I couldn't find one anywhere. Again, since my dad wouldn't let me lift weights before I turned 13, on my 13th birthday, I started lifting. So it's been a minute, and I think I did 6 reps on the leg press on the ARX machine, and I could barely walk. I mean, and again, I actually wasn't sore the next day. That was the other thing that was kind of amazing, was like it was really intense, and I guess it's using AI, right, to maximize what the eccentric and concentric. Is that how it's working basically?
Sort of.
Yeah, and so it was just, I would imagine that once people get to some, like you said, if you take someone who's untrained, they're going to experience some soreness. But once people get, moderately trained, should they be feeling sore the day after a workout, or
They'll feel some fatigue for sure. It's kind of hit or miss with my own workouts personally and with other members. Sometimes I'll ask how they're feeling after their session. Oh, I'm good. I'm a little fatigued, whatever it may be. Some people, oh yeah, I'm sore. Oftentimes, like our chest muscles is a big one, our lats. And what's really cool about the equipment is it allows you to activate your muscle fibers in ways that you typically don't with free weights. So you're really able to get like a deep like stimulus within the muscle fibers versus with free weights. Let's say I'm capable of lifting 100 pounds, but I'm concerned about safety and whatever. So if I'm only going to do 75, you're not going to be properly loading your muscle fibers if you're only doing 75, but you're capable of doing 100. So with this equipment, you're going to do 101.2 because the machine's meeting you exactly where you're capable of doing. And over time, it's going to continue to match your progression. So as you get fitter and stronger, the workout continues to get harder. And a lot of principles, if you're familiar with exercise physiology and whatnot, we're thinking about periodization, we're thinking about progressive overload, we're thinking about these principles that need to be in effect in order for us to get long-term results with our exercise. Those are all kind of baked into the method. So as I mentioned, we have a lot of people who they come into the studio, they're not super well trained. They haven't had a consistent routine. They don't exactly know what to do within the gym. They don't have to worry about all those different principles. How many sets, how many reps, how many of this movement, how many of that movement, push, pull, legs, all this sort of stuff. It's just come in, work hard, do your thing. All of the principles that you need to get results over the short and long term are already baked into the system, into the method.
So while I'd heard of the Carol bike and the ARX machine, I'd never heard of the Vesper machine before I went into a SmartFit studio. And I was familiar with I think it was a Stanford study where I think they were doing pull-ups and they used like a cold sleeve to do so they had a control group and a test group where like one group did as many pull-ups as they could, in multiple sets. And then they had one that in between the sets, they put their arm into this cold sleeve. And I think they did like 3 to 4 times as many pull-ups in the same period of time. And my directional understanding is that the Vesper bike uses kind of a similar concept. Maybe talk a little bit about that, because my experience with it was I was kind of doing a HIIT workout, but it didn't feel like it. Mm-hmm. It was weird.
So what's really cool about the Vesper is that essentially, so we have cold cuffs that are squeezing both like the quads and the hamstrings and then like your biceps, triceps. They're squeezing your muscle with cold water. So it's called BFR training, blood flow restriction. And essentially what that does is it creates an isolated environment within the muscle. So when you're producing lactate, you're producing more hydrogen ions, you're changing the pH of the muscle. Your body is becoming more acidic within those areas. And your body basically thinks you're undergoing a very challenging anaerobic exercise. But by cooling the body, you're going to reduce the amount of stress being placed upon the body. So it doesn't feel like you're doing a really hard workout, but your muscles think you're doing a really hard workout. So you're getting increases in your recovery hormones. So like IGF-1, HGH, testosterone, that sort of stuff. And then the cooling actually reduces the amount of cortisol that's being produced from the exercise. So you're going to sleep better, improve your body composition. I use the word invigorating. I would just feel really good when I get off the Vesper. So you're recreating a very potent anaerobic stimulus, and you're doing it in like a seated elliptical position. So it's meant to be very minimal, like wear and tear on the body, specifically like the spine and the hips and that sort of stuff. So very potent anaerobic stimulus, essentially.
So the other one that, because I'd done hyperbaric chamber before, and I remember when I was in the Utah studios, I was like, oh, you guys want to have hyperbaric? And then the other Connor was like, well, no, we have this other thing that's even better. Maybe talk a little bit about that, because I tried it for the first time in your studio, and I was like, wow, that was a fantastic workout. Yeah. And it was only 20 minutes instead of spending 90 minutes in a hyperbaric chamber. And I wasn't just sitting there like a vegetable.
Mm-hmm. One, your last point is an important one, because with most hyperbaric, you're mostly just laying in a chamber. So your heart rate is close to resting baseline, your respiration rate, same thing. And so when we're exercising, typically we're going to be anywhere from zone 2 to zone 5 on the bike, depending on how we're including it in people's programs. But with the oxygen, what's so special about it is that most of the time you're getting about 90% oxygen, which we're breathing about 21% right now. So it's 4.5 times what we're breathing at sea level for oxygen saturation. And then we also have the ability to flip the switch to go to 14%. So that's the equivalent of 10,000 feet above sea level. So we're able to go from high oxygen, which is going to improve your power production by up to about 20%. And then we're going to go to low oxygen, which is basically like training at 10,000 feet elevation. So you're going to increase red blood cell count. You're going to increase like energy metabolism. You're going to improve your ability to burn both fat and glycogen. So you're improving your metabolic health, your cardiovascular health, your cellular health, increasing red blood cells, which is going to help improve energy production. And then by having an elevated heart rate and really opening up your system, so those microcapillaries, those small blood cells and arteries and veins that are probably not opened up during baseline, you're opening all those things up to really get that blood and that oxygen deep into your system.
Mm-hmm. So when I've read, stuff about, anti-aging longevity stuff, whether it's Peter Attia or, Rhonda Patrick or any of these other folks, they're always the two big ones they always talk about that, if you want to, because I'm approaching 60 now and, my dad's 83 and, people that are really getting towards you're on the back nine, to use a golf analogy for sure. They say being able to keep muscle mass and being able to maintain your VO2 max are probably the two most important things to measure. And it's funny because most people, when they undertake a fitness program, they weigh themselves, maybe they get their body fat taken. Who knows how accurate that is, depending on how they do it. And that's about it. You guys are doing basal metabolic rate, you're doing VO2 max, plus you're doing the body scans. Maybe talk about how important understanding what your baseline is and that data feedback loop to helping people actually maintain and even improve their health and wellness.
Yeah, I mean, as you and your wife both went through, you did kind of our baseline testing where you did all those different measurements that you mentioned. We're able to establish a true baseline of where someone's at in the exact areas that they're either really strong or they need to improve. And then by having that data and consistently measuring it either every session, every month, or every quarter, we're able to create a very clear pathway of exactly what they should be focusing on in order to get the results that they say they want most. So there's really no excuse to not have like all the information and the tools that you need in order to get the results that you're after. And I mean, every body is going to be operating on similar like physiological principles, but then there's differences of whether it's age, it's gender, it's hormones, it's personal preferences when it comes to diet, whether you're following any sort of specific diet. So there's a lot of circumstances and variables that you kind of got to fit in, but you can rely upon those first principles of, okay, yes, we need to be insulin sensitive. Yes, we need to be strong. We need to have a high VO2 max. And then there's a number of different variables that go into those different numbers. But it's really important to be able to have data to guide the decisions that we're making, because if you don't have good information to make decisions off of, you're probably not going to be able to make very good decisions.
Right. Well, so when people are thinking about, again, it's just stunning to me that most people, they don't even know, they don't have an end goal in mind. They don't necessarily start with a reasonable baseline, and yet. Because I think it's so funny. I forget what the data, what the information is, but it's something like we're spending something like, 100 times what we used to spend 50 years on health and wellness. And yet the population has never been less healthy and less well than we are now. And so it's like this weird, inversion where we're spending more time and money and we're getting worse. We're getting sicker. We're getting less fit. Why do you think that is? And what do you think that you guys are doing that's different?
That's a very deep question. So I mean, in general, I think we're a lot less healthy than we used to be because our food is much different than it used to be. The nutrients within that food is very different. So a lot of us eat a lot more processed food than we used to. Back in the 1950s, and don't quote me on this data, but back in the 50s, let's say, we were growing 80 to 90% of our food at home and eating almost all of our meals at home, versus now we only eat like 10 to 25% of our meals at home, or like make it all ourselves. And so we're losing out on a lot of nutrients within our diet. And there's a lot of kind of fringe areas that it depends on who you ask, which longevity guru you ask, of what's the reason that we're all so sick. But if you think about bright artificial lights late at night and disrupting our circadian rhythm. If you think about, we're walking way less steps than we do on a day-to-day basis. You think about lack of exercise, less than 1 out of 4 people meet the minimum recommended exercise guidelines set by the US. But then you also look at people in other countries, these supposed blue zones where people are living to 80, 90, and 100 who don't necessarily exercise as much. So that's not the panacea of like longevity, but where exercise really comes into play is the importance of like your health span. So how independent, how strong, how capable are you going to be, and how long are you going to be able to maintain that late into your life? So, I mean, going back to the original question, it's not easy to pinpoint the exact reason that we're unhealthier than we used to be. I think for different people, it's going to be different things, but I think comfort kills. So, I mean, we have Netflix, we have Uber Eats, we have like so many conveniences in our day-to-day life that we no longer have to go hunt to get our own food. We're getting things out of our fridge. We're watching Netflix until 10 o'clock at night. We're getting bad sleep. We have xenoestrogens within all of our plastic foods. We're putting fake stuff on our skin. Like, we're in a very artificial, modern environment that isn't necessarily conducive to the natural functioning and health of the human body. And that's why I think like supplementation is really important nowadays. I think we have to detox our bodies, making sure like our liver is good. We're giving our body everything it needs to expel all the microplastics and those xenoestrogens and all the things that we're exposed to in a modern environment. But unfortunately, like our food isn't as nutritious, like our system isn't set up to encourage wellness realistically, or we're being sabotaged with bad food, bad modern environment, essentially, is the gist of my opinion.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So digging the hole, we covered that one. Let's talk now about filling the hole back up, about recovery, and talk about maybe some of the things that you're doing now, some of the things maybe you're going to start doing with with the partnership with Lumati. You talk a little bit about some of that, and kind of where's the 80-20 break point, right? Because like, I'm never going to be Brian Johnson where I'm going to sleep at 7:30 or 8 o'clock at night. I'm taking 847 vitamins 3 times a day. Like I feel like there's an 80-20 thing. And what are the modalities that you think have the biggest bang for the buck and that you think delivers the most value for your clients?
Well, I don't know if I pointed out my book when you were in my studio, but my book is called Most Things Most of the Time. And so it's essentially focusing on the most important elements of a healthy lifestyle and doing it more often than not. Essentially another way to say 80-20. Because no one's ever going to have the perfect routine. Even Brian Johnson, like he's constantly adjusting his routine, chopping and changing things because he's in pursuit of trying to find the quote unquote perfect routine. But most of us, we're just trying to get by of like figuring things out on a day-to-day basis. And I think the most important things, the number one that comes to mind is sleep. So we really need to get good sleep. And then good sleep starts like the night before and the day of, right? So you need to get morning sunlight. You need to move your body. You need to properly fatigue yourself so that you're actually tired by the time you go to bed. You need to have a consistent sleep schedule. So you're waking up and going to sleep around similar times every day. You need to move your body. You need to be strong. You need to have good cardiovascular health. You need to eat nutrient-dense food. You need to stay hydrated. And again, that's like, it's a lot of things to focus on. Like I always joke that trying to be healthy is a part-time or a full-time job because there's so many things that go into it. So I always think about trying to set myself up for success by creating an environment that's going to be conducive to healthy living. So not having too much junk food in the house. Now, granted, I love ice cream, and my wife always jokes that she's going to write a tell-all when I'm making have an ice cream at the end of the night. But creating an environment that's going to allow you to be successful, because we only have so much willpower on a day-to-day basis, and if we're constantly having to pull ourselves back from making a quote unquote bad decision about our health, then it's going to get really tiring from a mental perspective. So having a good routine, having a good environment, having good people around you that are seeking out similar goals of wanting to feel good, wanting to perform well, wanting to live long, those are really important for living a healthy lifestyle.
One of the other things too is I think even when you people looking for the perfect formula, right? Whatever Brian Johnson's trying to do, all the biohacking stuff. I feel like even that, meaning like what's best for you, let's talk about, hey, maybe you're keto or you're carnivore or you're Mediterranean or whatever diet you're following. And I know I was reading something Peter Attia was saying about having to cycle those things, even though keto might be good for a whole bunch of different reasons, maybe not always being keto and being able to cycle. How do you feel about some of those things? And does it apply just to diet? Or do you think that's also true when it comes to like recovery modalities that people might do and things like that? Is there some value in sort of changing it up?
Yeah, I mean, when I think of keto, I see keto specifically as a seasonal diet. And so it's really good for a specific set of conditions. So whether it's weight loss, it's improving like the clarity of your brain and your cognitive function. Um, Most diets should be done for a specific purpose. But funny thing is, diet comes from the word dieta, which means lifestyle or way of life. And so people think diet strict, like eating this specific thing. But diet just means way of life. And I try to avoid being dogmatic when it comes to realistically anything, but specifically diet. And so when I think of diet, I think find 5 to 10 proteins that you can consistently eat for forever. Eat colorful, complex carbohydrates, and then eat minimally inflammatory fats. So I'm biased towards animal-based proteins, so I'm going to prioritize those within my diet. I'm going to try and get a few different colors in my weekly rotation of like veggies and fruits and that sort of stuff. And then focusing on like grass-fed butter, ghee, coconut oil, avoiding trans fats, avoiding too much saturated fat, which that's another whole rabbit hole to get into. But I try to rely upon principles as opposed to, no, I must do this. And I do think those diets have a time and a place because there's a lot of efficacy for showing that a ketogenic diet, a low carb diet, is really able to have a lot of benefit for the human body. But as soon as you take anything to the extreme, it becomes a negative in a sense. So moderation.
Let's talk a little bit about both supplementation when it comes to, everything from, what kind of vitamin D are you taking, magnesium, to peptides and TRT and all the other stuff. Like there is so, and some glutide and all that, people that are using the weight loss, drugs that have a lot of, maybe some unintended consequences associated with them. How do you help? I mean, is that part of what SmartFit does at all? Or like, how do you help guide people? Because there is so much noise in that space and it's so hard. You ask 10 people their opinions, even that are knowledgeable, and you'll get 12 different answers. Yeah. So how do you help people navigate that? Even people like, maybe even like friends and family, like, for me, I am fairly steeped in it and I'm confused all the time.
Yeah. Well, when people ask, oh, what should I be taking? I say, well, what do you want to accomplish? Because you need to supplement according to what your needs are. So, I mean, if you're deficient in vitamin D, yes, I would recommend you probably should spend some more time in the sun, but you might need a vitamin D supplement. But then we also need to make sure we're getting enough vitamin K. We need to make sure we're getting enough magnesium. It all comes back to what is the purpose and the goal for what it is that you're supplementing. So when I tell people our recommended amount of protein that they should be taking in on a day-to-day basis, they're like, Connor, I can't do that. Like, that's too much protein. I'm like, okay, let's look at this product. Let's look at this product and make it sustainable for you to hit the goals that we're trying to hit. If you're just taking 487 or whatever supplements, and it's like you're doing it because this longevity guru said it's going to be good for you, I don't think that's the way to do it. It's using blood work, it's using your goals, it's using what you're actually wanting to get from those supplements, and then knowing that a large percentage of supplements out there on the market are not what they say they are. So being very intentional and sourcing your products properly. And that's not even to get into all the peptides and that sort of stuff, which that is equally and probably even more important when we get into those kind of higher strength, let's call them supplements.
I mean, I've had to, and actually I'm doing this now with Dumati. Again, I'm certainly more knowledgeable than most, not anywhere near as knowledgeable as you are, but I'm like, at some point I'm just like, okay, there's too much noise. I know how to read my blood work for the most part, but I'm definitely not an expert. I'm like, I just got to get a functional medicine doctor to really help me understand how to interpret all of my testing, my microplastics test, my gut biome test, my blood work, my urine analysis. I mean, there's so many inputs, and I'm just like, I've got to outsource that to someone who's super knowledgeable. Because the other piece I think that's really challenging, like you were saying, even if I want to get, so let's say, hey, I need to get a vitamin D3 with K2,
magnesium.
Yeah, but it's like from which manufacturer? And like you said, a lot of times because the FDA doesn't really, regulate it at all. Like what they say is in it may not be what's in it. How do you know?
It's an unfortunate reality that the numbers I've seen is about 80% of supplements will have either stuff in there that they don't say is actually in there, or it doesn't have kind of the reasonable amount that you're wanting to get in there when you're looking for that supplement. And so
80%. Wow.
again,
I wouldn't get 50, but
don't
okay.
quote me on the numbers, but
it's high.
It's high. And I've heard unfortunate kind of whispers that, and I won't use names, but certain regulators, like they can't necessarily be trusted as far as like putting their stamp of approval on a supplement.
Right.
So you just really need to do your due diligence on like what products it is that you're taking in, making sure they're from clean sources. They're doing in-house testing of those products and really standing behind their product, because many companies they'll get it manufactured somewhere, they'll slap their label on it, and then they'll sell it. Or even they'll get it manufactured here, and here. And those different manufacturers might have different standards of how they're producing their product, but then they're all getting the same label on them. And you have no idea where it was produced from. So ideally, it's getting produced in-house. They're doing their own testing and then also doing testing outside of the company to make sure, yep, what we say is in there is actually in there. So that's why I'd say it's kind of a full-time job to really make sure that you are doing right by your own body and what you're putting into it.
Yeah, it's overwhelming because not only that, but just because company ABC is doing it right today doesn't mean they'll be doing it right 6 months from now. And
well, you have all these different big companies who are buying out the smaller brands who have really made a name for themselves, and then for the purpose of trying to increase profits, they're cutting out this and then adding in this, or like they're trying to improve their bottom line basically. So the little guys, they're coming into the marketplace with this really good intention, and then the big companies are coming in and buying their product and swapping out the good things for some not as good things.
Is that true in the testing arena too? Like, I never really thought to ask that question until just now, but so hey, I go to Quest Labs or Quest Lab or whatever, I go and I get my blood work done or whatever. Like, I get the results back, but how do I know how well they're doing their job? Is there variability in the quality control there too, in your experience?
I don't have a ton of insight into that directly. I think one of the problems with the internet nowadays is there's an unreasonable amount of information out there. And even someone who's like well educated in the space, you have to, if you see something, you have to really like pull on that string and get to the end of it to understand that this is actually legitimate. So you see, like, for example, we have a conversation where someone was making claims about what's happening within the body. They say one thing and then they say a different thing. It's like, wait a second, like, I thought you were a trustable person. Like, why are these things not quite stacking up? And so you really have to be astute and kind of suspicious of a lot of things within the wellness space to make sure that you're doing right by your body. And I think it's equally as important what you're not doing as what you are doing for your health. So whether it be processed foods, whether it be alcohol, whether it be sugar, whatever it is, what you're not putting in your body or doing to your body is equally as important as what you are doing to your body. So you're probably better off focusing on whole foods, moving your body, getting good sleep. Like, those are going to be the most things most of the time versus the other things, which, yeah, there's probably going to have some improvement in your lifestyle and your health and whatnot. But if you're not doing the biggest, most important things, that other stuff doesn't really matter.
So you mentioned it before, but maybe talk a little bit more about how critical sleep is. Because I know if I had one self-criticism of myself, I go back in time and think about what I could have done. If I could pick one thing I could have done better throughout my life, it's for sure getting more sleep. I don't need that much sleep. I kind of need like 6 hours or so, but there's a lot, big chunks of my life, that's not included, where I'm getting 2.5, 3 hours of sleep. And I feel like it just ripple effects through everything.
Well, supposedly there's about 3% of the population who are like super sleepers. So they don't need as much sleep as the average person does. So again, that's a very small minority.
Right.
But a cycle of sleep is about 90 minutes. So we ideally want to get at least 4 or 5 of those cycles. So that's going to be 6, 7.5 hours, somewhere around there. Going back to the importance of sleep. So, I mean, that's when our body is cleaning itself. That's when it's kind of resetting everything. And I saw some research recently that was talking about basically we have like an overload of energy production and we need to shut our bodies down for 6 to 8 hours in order to like bring it back down and like relax a little bit. But really biggest thing is going to be cleaning itself, getting that rest and recovery, allowing for women specifically, that's when like hormones are being produced predominantly. And so it's really important for women to get sleep. Specifically, women need like an extra 1 to 2 hours of sleep comparatively to men.
That big difference. Yep.
There's a funny stat. Women are 14% more likely to want to engage with their husbands if they've gotten an extra hour of sleep. And so, yes. And like teenagers, for example, they need like as many as like 10 to 12 hours sometimes during certain growth periods. And so younger people need more sleep. Women especially need sleep for hormone production and just to feel their best. And it's when our body is really resetting itself and cleaning itself. And so if we're not getting enough sleep, that's going to compound over time. So I mean, a few facts is if you get even just a few days of inadequate sleep, your body will show up as being like pre-diabetic. So it's really impacting your blood sugar, your mood, your fuel utilization, all that sort of stuff. And again, don't quote me on the numbers, but I was listening to this study or this podcast years ago, and a week of sleep deprivation turned on like 15% of our anti-longevity genes. And so it was really breaking the body down quickly when you're not sleeping well.
How long does it take to recover from a week of bad sleep?
I heard a stat in college that if you do an overnighter, it takes your body 2 weeks to fully recover from that. So it's pretty substantial.
I was actually, small aside, I was listening to this podcast earlier today, and this lady was basically saying the praises of creatine, where she was specifically saying that if you take, I think it was like 20 or 25 grams of creatine.
I think that was me telling you that.
Well, no, it was specifically around, so basically you got a really bad night's sleep, that you could basically be able to function as well as if you had gotten a good night's sleep just by taking creatine. Is that accurate?
Yeah. It might have been on the Rhonda Patrick show that you were referencing, because I saw that from her. So basically the way creatine works is it's one of the first ways that your body is able to produce energy, especially during like high intensity exercise. And so we only have about 5 to 10 seconds worth of storage within our muscles. So you use it very quickly, and then it takes about 1 minute to refill 50% of the storage, and then an additional 3 minutes to like really refill the storage specifically within your muscles. And so the general recommendation for creatine is about 5 grams for most people, maybe 10 grams on average on a daily basis for like larger men. And then the kind of bolus dosage that you're referring to when you're getting a poor night's sleep, consuming closer to 20 grams is going to have a lot of benefit for offsetting those negative effects of the poor sleep, essentially. And then there's also data coming out in regards to Alzheimer's and general kind of brain function that supplementing creatine is beneficial for those outcomes as well. I also saw that a paper where people who suffer from anxiety and depression had lower amounts of creatine in their prefrontal cortex. So there's something going on there with like energy within the brain, essentially, and contributing to those kind of the pathologies of those conditions.
You take too much creatine? Is that like a thing?
Probably.
Yeah. I have like a whole bucket of it, but yeah.
I actually got a kidney stone about 5 or 6 years ago. I was doing a loading phase of creatine. So you're doing 5 grams 5 times a day. Oh, wow. And I just wasn't drinking enough water. And so one day I was laying on the couch and I had back pain. I was like, oh, this is funny. And then ouch. Yeah. So I was pretty uncomfortable. So my wife is always a little hesitant when I'm taking creatine, but you definitely notice a big benefit, whether it's your lifts in the gym or cognitively and that sort of stuff.
It's actually, oddly, believe it or not, I've never taken creatine in my entire life. I'm about to add it to my stack. One of the things I've noticed myself, and again, I didn't pay attention to this until, the last few years, but I got my WAP and, Whoop, and my Oura Ring and 8 Sleep and stuff like that, is how much deep sleep and how much REM sleep. So my experience directionally is if I'm getting about an hour of REM and about an hour of deep, I feel terrific. If for some reason, maybe I had a couple of drinks or something, I get less deep or less REM sleep. Usually it seems like the deep sleep always suffers first, then the REM sleep suffers second. What's the right amount of deep and REM sleep to get?
I think Whoop says you want at least like 40% of your total sleep should come from.
There's a percentage, not a nominal amount. It's a percentage.
Yeah, I mean, if you're matching that to, hey, you should get 7 to 9 hours of sleep, it's probably going to be somewhere between 3 and 4 hours of REM sleep is like the ideal. I think my average is like 42 or 44% or something like that. So I'm getting between 3 and 4 hours of REM and deep on a nightly basis. But yeah, if I have alcohol, like those numbers are going to go down for sure. And I was talking about Whoop with someone this morning, and what I really like about it is that it gives you trends, right? So, oh, I did this thing, I had really high scores. I did this other thing, I had really low scores. So it's kind of that feedback to yourself of being able to identify like the positive and negative traits, and then taking action, hopefully towards the positive. I think it was Whoop's CEO that said that Whoop has done a whole lot for alcoholics because it shows you how negative it is for your sleep and your recovery score, your heart rate variability, all that sort of stuff. One point that I thought of previously when we were talking about genetic testing, urine testing, blood testing, full body MRIs, Whoop, Aura, it's like there is such a thing as measuring too many things because there's so much noise within those different data sets that it can be hard to really lock in on like the exact perfect thing that you should be doing. And so taking the tools that we have with like a grain of salt almost, and it's like, okay, 5 out of these 6 things are directionally telling me I should be doing this and not doing that. So taking it broad, but using them to like guide your decisions essentially. But I don't rely upon this as being like absolute truth. It's like, am I really a 42 out of 100 today? I don't know, but I feel pretty good. And so not leaning too.
Well, you have
much
2
into
burdens
the data.
today, so
True.
well, so along the lines of having too much data, how do you feel about people occasionally using a continuous glucose monitor to sort of, see how they react to different foods and things? Is that something that you think people should at some point give a shot? And,
Yeah, I mean, I think everything realistically, people will ask me questions. I'll say, well, it depends. It's like, are you healthy weight? Are you overweight? How's your A1C? How's your blood sugar? How's your blood work? So you want to get the context associated with whatever that question's going to be. I think if someone's really trying to lose weight and they struggle doing so, like, yeah, that's going to be a tool that we have within our kit that we can use to give us more information to make the right decisions. But if you're doing it just willy-nilly or just for kind of no good reason, I don't know if it's going to be the best pursuit, but that's where it really comes down to like individualization and personalization of your routine and what it is that you're looking to get out of it.
So let me tell you what I think my nirvana would be, and you can tell me that it's never going to happen or it's going to happen in the next 3 years. But to me, just like you said, I think there's too much information for it to be for any one person, even with a coach like yourself, for all of it to be actionable. And you can just like drive yourself crazy. What does my continuous glucose monitors tell me? What does my urine analysis tell me? How long ago was it? What does my blood work tell me? How long ago was it? My workout feedback, all that stuff. What I really want is I want to basically do all of that stuff on a fairly regular basis. And then I want AI to tell me, customized to myself, hey, Dave, based on your sleep score, based on your most recent blood work, based on this, and this is what you should do today. And this is what you should avoid today. And, I'm not going to take all the advice in a perfect world, but just knowing those things, like that's how I would love it to be. How far away are we from something that could be a little bit more prescriptive where the human brain, just isn't capable of absorbing and analyzing and, providing guidance that's that granular?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're far away for those types of technologies. I mean, you think about, let's say someone wears a CGM, they have a Whoop and an Aura, they're doing quarterly blood testing, quarterly VO2 max and metabolic testing. They're doing body composition scans on a consistent basis, which, by the way, I basically describe SmartFit as far as like the cadence at which we're kind of able to keep our finger on the pulse of how people are progressing over time. And I really don't think we're far from having AI that's able to like truly analyze all that data and hopefully kind of reduce the noise associated with like the margins of error within the different technologies, because any technology you have, more likely than not, there's going to be some margin of error within that measurement. So you need to kind of know that going into it and then incorporate that into your decision making. But I do think we're no more than a few years away of having those health AIs and like the accuracy of our wearable technology that they're able to integrate into one single reading or one single recommendation of you should do this, you should not do that. And then creating routines and lifestyles that really encourage long, healthy life and bring us away from the opposite of that.
In terms of wearables, do you think the Whoop is the best one out there? The MG Whoop is the best one out there at the moment, or what do you think is the? Yeah, they probably all have some things that are slightly better at than others, but
yeah, I mean, we're both wearing Whoop, so yeah, we both like the Whoop. I think it's a really great product. Again, I use it to recognize trends within myself and give myself a positive feedback loop. I do think it's also good to sometimes take a break from that. Like, this is actually the first week that I'm wearing it after not wearing it for a few weeks, just to not have to think about my data a little bit. And I mean, I'm surrounded by data every single day within my day-to-day life with SmartFit and whatnot. And so I think it's a really great device. I think they're only going to continue to get better as far as the accuracy and the efficacy and the actionable information as the kind of software gets smarter with what it's able to provide for us. So, I mean, it's a tool. It's not a perfect tool, but it is a great tool.
Now, does SmartFit integrate, wearables like a Whoop or a Ring into the guidance that you guys give, or not really?
We're working on it.
Yeah.
We do it on kind of a case by case where I have like a group of my members who I know they all have Whoops and we're all in the same group. So I can wake up and see, oh, my 3 trainers are this recovered. I'm going to take it easy on them today. Or members are really high recovery. So it's like, all right, let's push it today. But again, there's some times where people walk in the studio, they have high recovery scores and they don't perform as well on the equipment. Or they walk in, oh, I'm not feeling that awesome today. And they really crush it. Right. So again, I don't think they're perfect measurements of like how people are actually feeling. There's actually a feature on the Whoop where you can turn off certain numbers, like your recovery score, for example.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So if you're a high level athlete going into a competition, let's say you're in the Olympics or whatever it may be, if you wake up and you say, oh crap, I'm at 35% recovery, like that's going to be a bad like mental feedback to you, and you might perform like you're 35% recovered. So I think it kind of goes into like the placebo effect of if someone tells you, hey, you're not recovered today, that's what you're going to believe. So I think it's important to use it as a tool because that's what it is.
Well, part of the reason I was excited to have you on the show is, like I said, I've been in a lot of gyms throughout my life, and SmartFit absolutely blew me away. I think you guys are best in class, genuinely. In fact, I just got a message from Katie today. She thinks she has an investor that's going to put all the money into open her location in Scottsdale. So I'll have a SmartFit hopefully in Scottsdale, fingers crossed. But maybe talk about maybe like the 1 or 2, biggest success stories since the time you've been at SmartFit where you're like, man, this is where they started and here's where they are. And we really had so much to do with that.
Mm-hmm. There's one gal that comes to mind pretty quickly. Is we were having a conversation recently. She was on the ARX. She had a bad day. She was negative on that day. And I said, hey, so-and-so, do you know how much stronger you are from where you started with us? And she said, no, I don't. So I said, you're 113% stronger than when you got started at SmartFit. And that was an average of like the 4 main lifts that we do within the studio.
Right.
And bone density was really important to this woman. Mm-hmm. And she reduced her likelihood of a fracture by over 50% in just 9 months of training with us. So I was really able to improve her bone density. And
was that strength increase over that same 9-month period?
That was 16 months.
Okay. Wow. Okay. I mean, for someone to increase their strength 25 or 30% during that period of time would be impressive.
Well, and as I shared, our average member, who's about 53 years old, gets 70% stronger in 12 months. Wow. We do 4 main movements that we're averaging out to get that number, which is a leg press, a row, a horizontal press, so chest press, and a pull down. And so our kind of main movements that our body is capable of doing. And leg press was actually the biggest increase on average, over 100% stronger across the data set that we're analyzing. And realistically, that's going to be one of the most important things that we can train for long-term health.
Sure.
Lower body strength is related to cognition, your likelihood of developing like dementia or Alzheimer's, your fall risk, all those sorts of things. So within SmartFit, we focus on the most important elements of a long-term and long-term health, essentially, because so many people, they're just comparing themselves to things that don't actually matter. It's like, hey, what's your bench?
How much you bench?
Like, does it really matter? No, not really. It's like, how strong are you? How much muscle mass are you able to maintain? Are we focusing on the most important things for you to live a long, healthy life? That's what we really focus on within SmartFit. Everything else is just kind of vanity. And we have a very non-politically correct term that we call that other stuff. But basically, people are just messing around when they're doing a lot of other methods of exercise.
Right. So We did kind of gloss over it a little bit. I just wanted to make sure we talked about it in a little bit more detail, which is let's talk about those recovery modalities. So you've got, various kinds of red light, similar, light spectrum, exposure. You've got cold plunge, you've got infrared sauna, massage. What are the, what are the ones that you think are the ones that are the most important for most people?
Well, sauna is a really big one. Doing sauna like 3 to 5 times a week reduces, all-cause mortality by up to 40%, which is a huge number. So just sitting in the sauna a few times a week. Red light therapy or photobiomodulation, PBM, it fundamentally influences how your body is functioning. So every single cell in the human body responds to light.
Mitochondria, basically? Is that basically what?
Mitochondria, yeah. So, mitochondria literally glow inside your body. They're absorbing that red light. And the way we actually produce energy within the cell is by receiving that red light. And that's what allows the mitochondria to really function at its best. And your eyes, your brain, your skin, your bones, they all respond to light. And red light has become very popular, but that's one that really influences the body's functioning from a recovery perspective, a metabolism perspective, energy, all that sort of stuff. So light is incredibly important for your health, and it's getting sunlight, but it's also avoiding too much artificial light. Artificial light is kind of like the junk food of light, because sunlight is full spectrum and it's fundamentally influencing how your body functions. When we get artificial light, you're mostly just getting like blue light, essentially, which blue light, it's also important. It really influences the body's functioning, but we don't want to get it just in isolation. It's like only eating protein or only eating carbs. Like you need the full spectrum in order to like get the benefit from it. So, PBM, so the photobiomodulation, super important for health and recovery. Sauna use, super important for recovery. Cold plunge, I feel amazing when I use a cold plunge. We spoke about this. It's one of those things you really got to hype yourself up for. I think some people really like it a lot more than others. There's definitely benefit from it as far as like inflammation and energy and that sort of stuff. I think there's a lot of research going into cold plunges and cold exposure specifically for how it helps the body. So I do know it's really good for mitochondrial health and energy and that sort of stuff. But if I were to pick 2 out of a hat, it'd be sauna and light therapy that are really going to be beneficial for health.
And what's the optimal amount of photo biological PBM? Yeah. Well, what's the right amount of exposure? 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 15 minutes? Does it depend on the gender, age? Is there
nothing I know as far as that, but probably 10 to 20 minutes when you're thinking about like PBM specifically. But there's this online guru who's very controversial, but he says Tina in relation to the sun. So there is no alternative. And so the sun is going to be the best red light therapy that you can have. But the thing with the sun, it's really demonized within a number of different spaces, and it's really misunderstood. And the sun's very powerful, of course. Like I was in the sun for a few hours this afternoon. I'm not pink, I'm not burned or anything. It's all about being intentional with your exposure. So my brother was putting sunscreen on my nephew this morning, and I was like, oh, let me see what the UV is. Like, let me see how the UVB, the UVA, what's the amount within the light right now. Because that's really what's going to determine like how powerful the sun is. And that is going to change throughout the whole day. So the important thing with sun exposure is getting morning, afternoon, and evening exposure. You can't really overdose on morning and afternoon, or morning and evening, because UV is practically not present. But between the hours of, let's say, 10 a.m. and 5 p.m., that's when the UV is going to be a lot stronger. So go for 10, 20, 15 minutes, whatever it may be during the afternoon. Try to get as much as you can in the morning and the evenings, because the biggest possible signal we have for the body and like your circadian rhythm and all that sort of stuff is the sun. Is the sun up? Is the sun down? Like your body is responding to those signals and it's acting accordingly, like within the inside. So your sleep-wake cycle, your metabolism. Are you hungry? Are you not hungry? Should you be sleeping? Should you be awake? Most things, it's going to be the most impactful stimulus and the signal for the body. So getting proper light exposure is super important for health, and that expands to cardiovascular health, cancer, metabolic health, brain health, all that sort of stuff. So kind of a tangent, but super important.
So if I'm getting, some good morning light exposure, some good evening light exposure, and 10 to 15 minutes here and there in the higher UV hours, do I not need the PBM?
I think it's going to be I think it's one of those modern things that's going to be beneficial for you. Like the light environment changes throughout the entire year. So there's certain parts of the year and certain parts of the world. I mean, you look at Alaska, you look at these Scandinavian countries, they might only have a few hours of sunlight per day. So using those tools is going to be really beneficial to kind of get that stimulus that they need.
Can you get too much exposure to PBM exposure? Like, is there some that's too much?
Probably. I
Yeah.
mean, as with
Yeah, I like it for hours, but like if you're like 20, because it's like honestly, like I my wife and I do it most days, and I'm generally doing 15 or 20 minutes, but I'm like, it's kind of random. Like I wasn't like there was any thoughtful analysis to that number or anything else.
Yeah, I mean, do what feels good, right? And the sun's out there every single day. And I mean, we're not spending 12, 14 hours out in the sun, but I don't know about you, but when I sit out in the sun for 30, 45 minutes, I feel good.
Yeah.
I feel energized. So listen to your body is a really important thing. Like when people are getting started in SmartFit or they're starting a new supplement, I always say, listen to your body. Like listen to what it's telling you. And I think a lot of people have become kind of desensitized to the signals of their body. But if you really focus on the inputs of exercise, sleep, hydration, all that sort of stuff, if you deviate from like a positive path, then you're going to feel that. So just listen to your body.
So one thing I wanted to make sure we did cover, because we talked about it at dinner the other night, is I know you're doing some stuff you have a personal interest because of your childhood around, asthma and related. Maybe talk a little bit about that. I just want to make sure we covered that because I think that's important that, I grew up with childhood asthma too. And I forgot the percentage. You said it was like 12% of the population. Like it's a high percentage.
It is. It depends on what county and what country you're talking about, but anywhere from like 8 to 13% of the population has asthma. And people often think of it as like a childhood disease, but there's actually more adults with asthma than there are kids. And less than half of people have like a full control over their symptoms. And so, as you mentioned, I mean, I grew up with pretty bad asthma as a kid, a couple dozen visits to the ER, the hospital, like that sort of stuff. I was on adult strength medication from the time I was probably 5 years old or something like that. And so I have a lot of personal experience with, again, not feeling my best and knowing what it feels like to deal with those things. And as I shared, not being able to breathe is like one of the terrifying and one of the loneliest feelings in the world. Like no one can breathe for me. Like my mom was an absolute angel and by my side for every single episode I ever had, but there was only so much she could do for me. And knowing what I know now, there's definitely things that could have been done to kind of like support my body's like system, whether it's interventions for acute episodes, having an asthma attack, or curating my environment, like my home environment, as far as cleaners within the house, like my bed sheets, like water filters, breathing techniques, supplements, like certain foods to avoid or consume. And so something that's like near and dear to my heart is being able to help like specifically children who suffer from bad asthma symptoms and give them guidance and consultation and recommendations around how they can support their body naturally. Because another rabbit hole, but modern medicine, it's incredible for so many different things, but asthma is one of those things where it's like, here's a pharmaceutical. It has a black box warning on it, but you should take it anyways. Like there's one specific medication that when I took as a kid, I took it for probably 10 years and it has a black box warning on it where it's basically, hey, this could potentially cause very bad like reaction within the body. And if we can at all avoid black box warnings on like the things that we're consuming or avoid pharmaceutical medications, I would definitely like to try and do that. So again, near and dear to my heart, passion project is being able to help people with that in the future as well.
So is there something you're doing in that realm where you're, actively, because I think you said you've got like some online groups or something that you're trying to.
So I have an Instagram. It's called The Asthma Guy.
Right.
So I have some videos on that, and I've built out like a book, like about a 75-page guide of like how to support your body naturally. I also offer consultations and that sort of stuff. So it's sort of on the back burner, but it's there for people, and there's a lot of free resources on there as well that people can make use of.
Super. Well, Connor, I can't thank you enough for coming on and sharing your wealth of knowledge. Where can people find you, your books, your SmartFit, all of it? Shameless plug.
So smartfitmethod.com is going to be the biggest and most main one. The Asthma Guy on Instagram, and most things most of the time on Amazon.
Hey, Connor, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you very much.